You're listening to the Mike on the Right podcast.
Hey friends, and welcome to the Mike on the Right show. This is your host, Mike Neal, and this is episode 28, released on Monday, November 10th, 2025. And yes, I am, as always, broadcasting from the heart of the heartland in central Indiana, the crossroads of America, the great Hoosier state. Again, everything you can do to continue to get this show out there, subscriptions, 5-star ratings, share with your friends. This episode and all the ones preceding it, you can find on MikeOnTheRight.com. I am so appreciative of your listenership and your support. This show continues to go strong because of you, and I am very thankful. Let's get right into, if you're watching the video version of this, I am wearing my Colts hat because of the big win in Berlin. It was a tight game, but the Colts pulled it out, and so congratulations to them winning in Berlin and moving to an 8-2 record. Let's talk about what's going on across the nation right now. We're going to talk about the what just happened in the 2025 off-year elections in a couple of different states. We're going to recap those, and are there any omens for the midterms in 2026 in the data from those elections? Then we're going to talk about SNAP benefits. What are they? Why are they being held? Why is there such controversy around them? And what is actually going on? And what should be done about those things, both in the current shutdown, which if you're listening right now, there's a negotiation going on. In a couple days, this could all be over, but there's still a problem with that, with SNAP benefits specifically. We want to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about this tragic crash that happened in Louisville with this UPS cargo plane. We're going to talk about what happened and what does this mean for the continuing conversation on aircraft and airline safety. Let's get right into where we are. Last week, if you listened to this show, I gave you some information about the 2025 elections, which if you're a Hoosier, that is certainly off year. In these states, they often have elections in the year right after a presidential election, specifically in New Jersey and Virginia having gubernatorial contests, but other referendums and elections across the nation in smaller fashion occurred. And I had said, based on polling data, that it looked like Virginia and New Jersey, regardless of who won the election, were going to be wrong. And both of those sets of polls were off by quite a bit. And so there's a lot of consternation right now going on around that. This is a huge omen. The Republicans are going to be swept away in the blue wave that is coming against Donald Trump. Is that true? Maybe. Let's talk about it. So let's look at these states, and then there's some down ballot races that I do want to talk about as well, especially in the state of Georgia. You probably didn't even know that they had a couple of elections down there. But let's look at Virginia and New Jersey. So Virginia has always been a weird state. They've been a swing state. Usually, presidentially, they vote Democratic. Every so often, you get Republican administrations in their gubernatorial races, in their House of Delegates and Senate, their legislative races. Obviously, a Republican is currently in there now. The lieutenant governor ran for election as governor because, again, in that state, you only get one term. You can run again, but you have to have a term in between that you're not there in order to run again. And so Virginia, I said this last week, is that it's a purple state with a blue hue. Because especially because of all of the federal workers, and a lot of them are Democrats, because it's just what it is. That's a factual statement, regardless if you like it or not. And of course, the shutdown really affects a lot of those people who are either furloughed or they're working and not getting paid. And so I think that was bad timing. And then Winsome Sears, who is a strong conservative, just a bad candidate all around, and you get a larger than expected victory for the Democrats. But I will shame anyone who voted for the Democratic Attorney General candidate who threatened in 2022 to shoot his Republican opponents and their families. Absolutely ridiculous. It's one thing, if you wanted the Democratic governor and lieutenant governor, fine. It's not my place to say. I don't live in Virginia. I wouldn't have voted for him, but that's fine. But if you voted, and you listening probably didn't, but if somebody votes for a person who literally says, I'm going to shoot my opponents, That because for whatever reason, right? Because I only vote Democrat, or I only vote against people who are on the opposite party of Donald Trump, or I only vote because of whatever. I would have rather you just not voted. How ridiculous is an attorney general candidate who literally threatens to break the law in the worst possible way, who incites political violence through his words? I'm going to shoot that person. I'm going to shoot that family because they are Republicans. Shame on the Commonwealth of Virginia for electing that man. Period. But let's look at this. Let's talk about New Jersey, and then I want to kind of shape this all together. In New Jersey, the Democrat won by a larger than expected margin. The race was tight. It looked like the Democrat was going to eke it out, but the Republican was well on his way to potentially be close. And he loses, too, to a Democrat. Now, I will say things about these states. They're blue or blue-hueish. Democrat states are going to Democrat. That election will affect absolutely nothing in states like Indiana, in states like Nebraska. Now, you can say maybe that it would, these purple states, maybe it'll affect them. Well, let's look at this. Let's look. They said one of the biggest things is that if you look at the demographic data, it says that Latinos and African Americans moved away from Republicans. Those are the same people who voted for Donald Trump. Well, and they're comparing that to the 2024 presidential election, in which Donald Trump and the Republicans made huge inroads in both of those segments of our population. And if you take those two races and look at each other, that's true. But a 2025 gubernatorial off-year race in which turnout plummets by a double-digit margin, which it did in both races, because not as many people. That's why like I don't know if it's like half the states or a quarter of the states have their gubernatorial elections in presidential years, because that you draw a lot of interest in that. There's others that have them in the midterm years. That still draws better interest than an off year. But you cannot compare, it's disingenuous, it's just for headlines and for fundraising, that the numbers from 2024 and then the shift in 2025 is indicative of anything. Now, I'm not saying it did or didn't change. I'm just saying you cannot extrapolate that from this data. And I'll tell you why. In Virginia, in the presidential year last year, there was a 70% voter turnout of registered voters in Virginia. You want to know what the number was in 2025, just a week ago? 53. That means that 17% difference. I mean, I didn't do the math of what the actual difference is, but 70 minus 53 is 17. So there is a whole segment, and it probably included some Republicans. Why? Because usually, the party in power usually does worse after a presidential election. That's almost historically true all the time. There's times where it hasn't happened, but mostly is historically true. So you've got that working against you. And then two, I think here we can agree that there was a lot of anger with, especially in Virginia, with the shutdown. Now let's look at New Jersey. They have the same thing. It's about 54% turned out in the 2025 gubernatorial election, and 65 to 66% in the presidential. And the reason that you have these is because there are motivational issues, and people don't vote in off years. Some people only vote in presidential years. So again, this isn't to say that maybe the demographics have or haven't shifted, but you cannot extrapolate that data from these races, period. Now, so I don't think Virginia or New Jersey are an omen on anything for anyone, period. Virginia is not going to vote for the 2028 Republican nominee, and probably neither is New Jersey. So from presidential politics, pluck, don't have to worry about them. What I will worry about is this. In Georgia, and don't forget California, and the hypocritical move that this state has elected an independent commission to draw their congressional maps. And now the people have overturned them for this set of maps. And I'm not saying that Texas didn't start it, but you don't, if Texas did something immoral, you don't fight immorality with more immorality. So that's hypocritical. So you're just as bad. I don't care now who started it. The war is moving on. Indiana's probably going to do it. Other states have done it with redistricting. That's not what I'm talking about. But that one big, California voters voted for more gerrymandering and less Republicans in Congress from California. Fine. Texas obviously is going to have less Democrats. They probably wash each other out, so it's going to make the difference is going to be made up in other states like Indiana and Missouri and whoever else is going to do this. But that's not what I'm talking about. Georgia. In Georgia, their utility commission, their public service commission, which sets utility rates, is actually elected. And in a sleeper race, 2 seats, I don't know how many were up. I think maybe it was just 2. But 2 seats went to Democrats, which they were all Republican before. That's a sleeper race issue. And that, I do believe, is an omen for the midterms. And I'll tell you why. Because there has been, for a while, in a lot of areas, because of the presidential administration prior, Joe Biden left us in a huge affordability crunch because of the outrageous amount of inflation. One of the largest this nation has seen in a while. And it doesn't fix itself overnight. Now, inflation has come down and there's some other considerations. Now we're looking at trying to save the job market because the Fed screwed up and kept their stupid monetary policy for far too long. So now we're seeing layoffs and things like that because we started to crest that hill. Hopefully these cuts are going to help blunt that. But here's one thing that the Republicans need to focus on here and now. We have to focus on affordability of groceries and of utilities and of cars and of homes. And I'm not talking about subsidies. I'm not talking about any of those things. But what I am talking about is we have to start speaking those issues and creating legislation and creating plans to address them today. And when we focus on indictments of, again, I'm not saying that Comey and I'm not saying that Brennan and I'm not saying all these people may not have broke the law. But that cannot be the focus of our party right now. Today, we have to change tack and we have to start talking about the affordability of the everyday American, the everyday Virginian, the everyday Hoosier, the everyday Nebraskan, the everyday Californian. We've got to talk about that now and today. We've got to have plans. We've got to introduce legislation. We've got to write documents of our platform, and we need to be ready for the midterms because it doesn't matter how many districts we change. If it is very clear that the electorate is really concerned about issues related to affordability of a number of things, and it's gotten better. The inflation is way down. Egg prices came way down. Commodities, oil has come down. There's a lot of things that have come down. But there's a lot of things that still have a lot of work to do. And if we are going to continue to focus on these other ancillary things, people are going to chuck us out of power. And that's the omen. It has nothing to do with Virginia. It has nothing to do with New Jersey. It has nothing to do with California. It has nothing to do with Colorado. It has everything to do with Georgia, weirdly enough, because the sleeper races, the Republicans got shellacked big time in what is a Republican state because we are talking about things that have nothing to do with what average people deal with. We've got to stop. We've got to turn. This is the omen we should be looking at. It's time to talk affordability. It's time to plan on affordability. It's time to solve affordability issues here and now. Speaking of affordability, let's talk about our second topic for today, which are SNAP benefits, which these are benefits are for folks who have, again, speaking of affordability, who for whatever reason under the law, they are unable to afford the food that they need, whether for whatever reason. And so SNAP benefits kick in for millions of Americans to help purchase groceries. Now, there's a tug of war on what you should be able to, like, should you be able to buy pop with that? Should you be able to buy candy bars with that? Should you be able to, whatever? And that's not what I want to talk about today. I always think that all those things need to be reformed, and honestly, it should be basic sustenance, and whether or not, a Coke is part of basic substance or not is up for debate. But during this shutdown, which is now almost, 40 days? I've lost track at this point, well over a month, in which the Republicans have voted 17 times for a clean continuing resolution to which they've not gotten because Democrats continue to stonewall it in Congress. Not again, Obamacare subsidies and all these things, those are separate issues that should never be attached to a CR. Now, if the Republicans want to say, you pass this clean CR and then we will hold a vote on subsidies afterwards, fine, whatever. That's fine. Vote for it, don't for it. I don't think Obamacare subsidies should even exist, but they're here now, and I don't know what Congress should do. Most people are going to say, hey, you have them now. You're going to kick a bunch of people off health insurance that otherwise have it and need it. That's separate from the SNAP stuff. But here's my problem with SNAP, and it's not actually about the program. It's about the funding of the program. SNAP funds should never run out because of government shutdowns. We've seen this legal battle, right? There's an appeals court that says that Trump has to use these contingency dollars to start paying for SNAP today. Well, there's a lot of legal problems with that because, one, the money is not appropriated. Two, who knows what the mechanisms are to do that? And so what does the Trump administration do? They go to the Supreme Court and say, hey, we can't do this by Friday or whatever the judges gave them to do it. And we're not even sure that it's lawful and legal, so we need to take a pause. And you know who stopped it at the Supreme Court? Here's the great thing, because everyone is saying right now, it's usually the same people that misappropriate scripture. They're misappropriating the truth and the law and how things work. And it's just like, this should just magically work. And I have no understanding how, but I'm going to, Judge Jackson, the judge that was appointed by President Biden, a far left liberal justice, because that's where this case came from, is in her zone. I think it's the First District Court of Appeals, where she gets to stay things on an emergency basis until the Supreme Court can take a look. Paused and said, no, administration, don't pay these right now until we figure things out. So you can't blame President Trump, and you can't blame the Republican or conservative Supreme Court, however you view it, because it is a far left liberal justice appointed by your boy, President Biden. I almost said Obama. That's really terrible. By President Biden, who paused it and said, we need to take a look at this. Time out. We got to take a look at this. And that's the right thing, because we have to make sure that things happen legally, because if we don't do things the right way, if we don't do things legally, it's going to come back and bite us in the bottom. I wanted these things paid yesterday. And that's my problem, right? So that's the facts. That's what's happened. You have the Trump administration who asked them to pause it, and a liberal justice that said, okay. So you don't get to blame President Trump for that, because the liberals joined him, because there's a lawful issue here, and they need to parse it out to make sure it can be done. Now, hopefully by the time you hear this, there's a deal right now that might open the government, and maybe this will all be moot. But my point is that SNAP benefits should never run out. Those things should be perpetually appropriated when a government shutdown occurs. There should be something automatic. It's again, you want to talk about pay of federal employees and all those things, and those should be paused, great. But you're collecting my taxes anyway. You're just not spending my money. So somewhere there are some bank accounts that are really churning some money of mine that's not getting spent, but it's eventually going to get spent. And so an appropriation for SNAP, for basic needs. Now, again, you can argue that there's people on SNAP that shouldn't be. You can argue that there are people on SNAP that don't work that should. All fair points. But there are a lot of people on SNAP who need it, and we've got to stop failing them. So what should happen in future appropriations for SNAP is, whatever the time frame is, if they actually passed a budget, if the House and Senate could ever figure out how to pass a budget, or if it's in a continuing resolution or some sort of omnibus package for a certain amount of time, and you fund SNAP, and then that appropriation runs out, the law should kick in that says that SNAP benefits specifically, things for sustaining life specifically, should then be held at the same appropriation until otherwise changed. That shouldn't happen for everything, but it should happen for SNAP. And that's the way to fix it in the future. And I call Republicans and Democrats in Congress to do so that we don't have this problem. No one should be using it. And this is Schumer's fault. I don't care. Now I'm going to get political. You can't have a clean CR that would have funded this, that the Republicans offered, and the Democrats said, no, we need to add all these things back from other bills that we lost on. Oh, plus we want to put Obamacare subsidies on this. And if you don't do that, we're not going to vote to open the government. No, they should have negotiated that later in a budget. And it sounds like that's going to happen. It sounds like there's going to be a separate vote on the matter. But no, this could have been done. This never should have happened. But since we have, and Republicans have done it too, Republicans have hijacked the CR process too, and we've talked about this before. So no, I'm 100% SNAP specific. We should have a piece of legislation that keeps the funding steady after the appropriation runs out, because we know the money's there. Again, taxes didn't stop being collected. And we should make sure that we should make sure that we perpetually spend that money to make sure in a government shutdown, it stays at that same appropriation level that it was most recently passed until something supersedes it. I got to move on, or we are going to go run out of time. Last item is, I'll be short and brief, because we've talked about this before, not this context, but you probably all heard what happened in Louisville. An MD-11 UPS plane crashed. I've seen the video. It's stunning. It's horrifying that this engine is like falling off or on fire or something, and they're trying to get lift. And this thing's got 3 engines. For the MD-11, for you nerds like me that love aviation, it's got 3 engines. Got one of them on the fin up on top where the rudder is connected. And this thing is on fire. It's trying to take out. And I'm thinking in my head, how do they not see that? How do they not just like hitting the brakes and stopping? And there's obviously a lot to be looked at. But it's a horrifying scene. And I love flying. I will continue to fly. I'm probably going to fly here again real soon. Prior to the end of the year, I love flying. None of that deters me. But we've had this series of things that have gone on. And if there's one thing that I'm a proponent of that maybe other conservatives don't like, and it is funding and regulation when it comes to public safety. Now, I'm not saying to take people's rights away, not anything like that. But there should be more funding, more inspectors, more stringent rules, more consequences related to air safety. There should be more funding for air traffic controllers. There should be more funding for inspectors. There should be more inspectors. This is one area that government should grow, because what happens is now look, 3 people were in the plane. Obviously, what is it, 11 or 12 have died at the time of this broadcast. I'm not exactly sure what that number is. But anytime a plane crashes, especially the larger ones, most of the time it's 50, 100, 200, 300. The consequences of bad maintenance, bad inspections, bad whatever, and we don't know what happened with this one, but the consequences may be few and far between, but they're large and they're huge when they happen. And so when it comes to, just like in pipeline safety with natural gas, just like all these things, I believe that there should be, I'm not saying maybe more regulations, but there certainly should be those regulations more strictly enforced, more inspections, maybe that interval should increase to ensure that things like this don't happen again and again. Now, again, we don't know what happened specifically in this situation. Obviously, people are looking into it. This is going to be a long investigation. But regulation when it comes to public safety on matters like these should be fully funded, should be more funded, should have clearer regulation, more inspections. We've got to nip these things in the bud. And it's not about Boeing or Airbus or anybody else. It's about the federal government ensuring that these are done. And I know some of that is done through self-inspection, and even those people need to make sure that they're trained. We need to make sure they're filling out reports properly. We need probably surprise inspections on inspections and quality control and all these things, because we cannot continue down paths like this. And we don't know where the failure is at, so I'm not going to point any fingers or blame or whatever, but we can specifically say no matter what happened, if all of this is a series of fluke events, we know we must do better. We've had what happened out at D.C. We've had all these close calls. We've had all these things that have occurred. We've had these incursions where planes have hit each other on the runway. We had the plane up in Canada that landed upside down. And it's a Delta flight, but still, I mean, we have to enforce this stuff, and we can only do that through a better process, better systems, better funding, more people. Folks, thank you so much for listening today. I am so grateful for your time. Again, if you could subscribe, give me a 5-star rating, share this with your friends, talk about this with your friends. I'm so grateful for your support. Again, this is episode 28. You can get this one and all 27 that came before it at mikeontheright.com. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week.